Perfect.
Okay. Okay, well, starting all over again because he's starting from the beginning. A lot of times when I talk to people about climate change, they say the climate's been changing very quickly many times in the past. Why is this a big source of concern now, of all times?
Well, there are two things about that. I mean, one is that, of course, climate does change. It's been changing all the time in the past. Nothing to do with people, but is now. God,
Start over again quickly.
do you really have to pull faces?
No, but you have to talk to me, not the camera.
Oh, okay. Yes, well, climate has been changing all the time in the past, often very dramatically. The last ice ages and warm periods in the past, and so on. But certainly in the last 15 to 20,000 years ago, it's been changing very dramatically in England. We had the end of the last ice age, about 15 to 18,000 years ago, and then it suddenly, well, very quickly got warmer, and human beings, moved up into England and all across Europe. Then, about 12,000 years ago, it suddenly got cold again. Within a matter of tens of years, not a long time, it got colder very much more quickly. And evidence for people and a lot of the animals that came with them disappeared. Then about 9,000 years ago, equally suddenly, it got warmer again, and people came back. The evidence for all this is in Cheddar Gorge, in Goff's Cave, and there's good evidence for people living in the Cheddar region at these two periods, 12,000 years ago, then nothing, then 9,000 years ago. So the climate changed literally within tens of years, and that was nothing to do with people. That was completely natural climate change. But now, of course, we've got the potential for natural climate change, but we've also got human-induced climate change. And the changes are happening now extremely rapidly, and there's the evidence for that is all around us. You've got the receding glaciers, we've got the freshwater lake, not freshwater lake, but a lake developing on the North Pole. You can't stand on the North Pole in the summer now because it's just water. And lots of other evidence. You've got the thinning of the Arctic ice.
Why is this something that, what's the evidence that leads us to believe? The other big question people have is, how do we know it's anything to do with us?
Mainly because the change since medieval times, which is linked with the Industrial Revolution. There was of course climate change in medieval times. You had the medieval warm period when England was a big grape growing country. It was much warmer, and grapes grew like as they do today in southern France. Then you had the Little Ice Age after the medieval period, when the Thames froze over and winters were long and cold. And then the last couple of hundred years, the temperature's been getting warmer again. Now that's a natural cycle, but since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, then we've got that trend has been reversed, and it's now getting cooler again. And that shouldn't be happening, because the temperature, if it was just down to natural causes, would be gradually getting warmer.
Yes, you're saying cooling in this part of the world, but warming in other parts. In other words, this is the whole weather climate issue. People say, well, it was really cold this year, so what's global warming all about? Or it's been really warm, so what's global cooling about? What's climate change about? What's the difference between climate and weather?
Well, climate is what happens long term. It's a gradual change. You're talking about global climate, because what happens in the temperate regions also affects what happens in the tropics. Weather is just what what's happening today. Today is a bit cloudy, it's not raining, it's quite warm, and that's what happens on a day-to-day and a week-by-week basis.
So why, as there's climate change, why is England getting cooler?
Well, you get different effects in different parts of the world to global warming. It'll be felt most, the effect of temperature rise will be felt most strongly in northern and southern regions, temperate regions. The Arctic will get proportionally warmer than, say, the tropics. What will happen in the tropics, though, it won't get an awful lot hotter, but it'll change, the rainfall patterns will change, and there will be droughts, for example, and long-term effects, not necessarily just with temperature.
And why specifically would England get cooler?
I didn't say England would
Well,
get,
no, but I'm just thinking about Lovelock said that England would probably stay pretty much the same because you had the warmth, the warming climate, but then you also had the loss of the Gulf Stream, which would make it get
yeah,
cooler.
because there are other effects to global warming, and we don't really know how those are going to affect us. But as the fresh water locked up in ice, on Greenland, for example, as that melts, then a lot of fresh water will be let off into the oceans, and that'll affect the flow of the Gulf Stream, because the Gulf Stream is basically a circulation. It comes up north from the West Indies, up north of Scotland, and then with freshwater intrusion into the northern Atlantic, the water cools and it drops down and is recycled deep down in the ocean. So at the moment our relatively sort of warm and benign climate is down to the Gulf Stream. If the Gulf Stream were to stop, then we would have a climate more akin to Scandinavia or Canada, which doesn't have the benefits of the Gulf Stream.
So what would that mean for farmers here?
What?
What would it mean for farmers in the UK?
If the Gulf Stream stops, it will get cooler. I mean, that's a sort of an anomaly, if you like, that global warming could result in cooler temperatures in northern Europe. But we don't know yet if the Gulf Stream is going to stop. It's probable that the...
Keep going. So just look at the tree here and keep talking.
Yeah.
We don't know that the Gulf Stream's going
I'll
to...
just go on.
They just go for a little walk. They'll be right back.
It's probable that if the dramatic change that I was mentioning between 12 and 9,000 years ago, that was very likely due to the Gulf Stream stopping or being diverted further south. We don't know if that was the case, but it was so rapid, the climate change, that it is likely that is what happened. And that could happen again. If the Gulf Stream was diverted, or if it weakens, then the climate could get colder very, 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 very fast.
So lots of ice and snow and lots of the time.
Yeah.
Well, that would have a huge impact on farmers.
So we've got the two things acting against each other. We've got global warming, which will increase the global temperature and will increase the temperature even in the temperate regions, against the effect of the Gulf Stream and it being diverted further south.
Yeah. So it's not a straightforward global warming, everybody gets warm or everybody gets cold. It depends on where you are, what your relationship is to ocean currents, and...
Yeah, some places will get warmer, some places will get colder. Everywhere will get more extremes of climate.
And weather in terms of along the coast, coastal rise?
In terms of weather, I mean, there's going to be more storms, heavier rain when it comes, longer dry periods, large parts of Africa, and I would think probably Australia and parts of South America will suffer droughts.
As they're currently doing in the U.S.
There's evidence, for example, in the past that the Amazon forest and the Central African forests, which now are so extensive, they were almost non-existent in the past. They were almost totally wiped out by climate change. Where the Amazon is now was just semi-desert.
So, but that's where our oxygen comes from. A lot of it isn't this the carbon?
No, oxygen
Eating.
is produced by any plants. Doesn't
No,
have
but
to,
I mean, but aren't they the large converter of carbon dioxide to oxygen? Is the Amazon?
all plants are converters of carbon dioxide. What the forests do is they lock up huge quantities of carbon. If you think of a tree as mainly composed of carbon, and all that carbon is tied up, locked up in trees. And if you've got a big forest, then yes, you've got a lot of carbon locked up. And not just the tropical rainforests either. You've got the boreal forests, which are by far the largest forests in the world, covering huge areas of the northern hemisphere. And they lock up a lot of carbon.
Great. Can you think of anything else you want to add to
No, I
this
think that's
discussion?
I think that's enough.
Yep, that's enough. I don't know. Let me think of how to stop it. What's here?